Typically, when you get into Isekai series, one of the major features of every single one of them seems to be the teen or young adult that is transported into another world. It's never really somebody that's older, unless it's something like Mushoku Tensei, where it's just kind of a man-child that is transported into another world. But we never get like an old person, a wise person that is transported into another world. So when I first seen the world's finest assassin gets reincarnated into another world as an aristocrat, I'm so glad that's probably the last time I'll say that. I was intrigued. This concept of this old, wise assassin that gets transported into another world, and taking that personality and that experience with him into this other world. But this is my review of The World's Finest Assassin Gets Reincarnated into Another World as an Aristocrat. I had to say it again. A 12-episode series that aired in the fall 2021 anime season. It was directed by Tamura Masufumi, who is of course known for doing the Misfitted Demon King Academy. Series composition by Katsuhiko Takayama, who did All I Know Is Zero, Big Order, F, Memories, Melodies, as well as Sagrada Reset. And interestingly enough, the writer and creator, Ruri Tsukiyo, who of course is known for doing Redo of Healer. But don't worry, stick with me. As we get into this, I'll kind of explain that. But it's my review of this series, so let's jump into it. Like most light novels of this type, the title is basically the intro. The world's finest assassin gets reincarnated into another world. But to be a little more specific, this world's finest assassin is in our current times, and he's working for this organization as an assassin for his entire life, because they took him in when he was young, they took care of him, and so he's been killing for this organization his entire life. All the way to the point where he's an old man, he's very wise, he's very good at what he does. But at some point, he's going to retire. And it seems like this organization, not wanting him to retire and not disappear on them, decides to take him out. And so they blow up this plane as he's on it. And while typically when people die, they'll essentially have their minds, their memory wiped, and they'll be reborn into the world again, the certain goddess ends up taking him, letting him retain his memories, but giving him a task, an option. He can have his memories wiped and then him basically be reborn like everybody else, or she'll allow him to retain his memories and his knowledge as an assassin if he'll do one task for her. He could do whatever he wants in that world, but he has one specific task, that after this hero defeats the Demon Lord, he will kill the hero. Because apparently, at some point when this hero kills the Demon Lord, he's gonna go crazy and they're gonna start destroying the world itself. So they're basically trying to get reincarnates into this world and tasking them with the mission to take out this hero. And it just so happens, this assassin is one of those people. And so he agrees to it, and this goddess allows him to basically choose his own skills, gives him the max potential possible stats that he can have before reincarnating him into this other world. And here he is born as Lu, this child of this family of assassins that eventually trains him up to be an assassin, and all the while, Lu in this new world is trying to essentially prepare himself for that eventual day that he'll have to take out the hero. And so the story basically follows this assassin, now in a new child's body, going about his days, learning to be an assassin in this world, and eventually building up the arsenal that he'll need in order to defeat this hero. And being old and wise in his previous life, he's very calculative about what he does, but at the same time also very cold about what he does. He ends up employing different girls that have mana potential to essentially work under him. He ends up learning how the spells of the world itself work and how he can formulate mass and everything in order to create whatever he wants to create, and thus basically creating modern weapons. And interestingly enough, also employing a lot of thoughts about how in this new life, where he was betrayed before and having that regret that he had in his previous life, with this new life, he's going to choose that any target that he has will be of his own choice. He's no longer going to work blindly for some organization or some other person. Instead, all the choices he makes are choices he himself wants to make. Which that gets me into my thoughts on this series as a whole. Starting off, I really enjoyed this show. I really love this introduction of not just the typical teenager that comes into another world and geeks out about, building a harem and having a waifu, all this kind of stuff that you typically get with an isekai series. This is an older gentleman, this is a wise old man that's kind of set in his ways. He's cold, he's calculative in everything that he does. And so having this kind of refreshing take on a Sekai was definitely welcome. The entire time I'm kind of wondering exactly where will this lead? What can this possibly create for the show? And for the most part, it gave me that. But I will say that I have some misgivings about how they presented certain parts of the series. Early on, it's all about his calm, collective self. It's all about his mindset and how he's always thinking about how to get the next weapon that he'll need for that eventual fight. Using other people, using the villagers, using these other girls that he's essentially employing. Everything is for the benefit of his target. And it felt wrong in a sense. It always plays in that gray area that technically this writer is probably really good at. I didn't watch Redo of Healer. I have not read into the series, but I do know that it's a very dark and very cruel series. And so I was kind of looking several times where I would start seeing that redo of Healer in the series. I think probably about the only place that I can think of it being is more like in Maha's story and her backstory. But taking a step back, what I really did enjoy about the series was in Lu, his mindset and how everything is for a reason, for a purpose. And again, it always played in that gray area of, as I kind of put it, the demon in shining armor. He'll end up helping this poor starving girl Tart by bringing her in and clothing her and feeding her, but it's for a purpose. He wants to use her as a part of his little assassin team, and so it makes you wonder, is she really in a better place? She's in a place of danger technically now. She's working for an assassin. She has to kill people. It doesn't seem like that's a better place for her to be. Same thing with Maha. Technically, they were selling off her for her body, and he comes in and, as a knight in shining armor, and whisks her away and protects her and feeds her and clothes her and gives her a place to stay. But he's still using her. He's using her to do all this work for him. So it makes you wonder, how is he any better than the people that employed him in his previous life? There's a sense of hypocrisy that it starts getting into that I found very fascinating. Is he really a good person? Are these girls in a better place? How is he any different than the people that once employed him? Those were the cool aspects that I really was eating up early on with the series. But sadly, the story kind of goes in a route that I felt very typical. At some point, there's a point in which they want to establish this other identity for Lu, which is, as with most isekais, the merchant. Yes, we have the merchant arc that most isekais have, and that's where I felt like a lot of that flavor of the series started getting lost. You could make an argument that this was a key role in kind of establishing a little bit of a change in Lu, giving him something else to really focus on besides killing, that would establish him and humanize him, but it never really does that. Instead, it really feels like an awkward harem point. Like, here's the point in which all the girls start fighting over him, and he never really cares. It's like one of those moments where it feels like it's trying to play off the harem elements. They establish the market in the other world, those standard tropes that you would get from most isekais, but with Lu's character, it doesn't really faze him. He doesn't really react to things the way that most shows did. And that's where I felt like it was kind of a stumbling point for the story, because I love Lu as a character because he's so cold and calculative, and yet here we're trying to put him in a standard harem setting, and he just doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. His character doesn't feel like it should fit in that situation. The only thing that I can think of giving him credit, this writer credit for, is that it almost feels like at some point it acknowledges that. It acknowledges the idea that despite the typical harem stuff mingling in with him, he doesn't react to it, and thus it may create a story element that could come in the later part of the story that we haven't gotten into yet, which, again, obviously this is only 12 episodes and the series continues on. Almost a feeling like because he doesn't react like most harem members, because he doesn't reciprocate that harem element, it might backfire on him. It's giving us hints that could backfire on him, but unfortunately for us as a viewer of the anime alone, unless this gets a second season, we're never going to see if that was really doing something interesting or if it's just a big waste of time. Because right now, with just 12 episodes, this segment of the story felt like a waste of time. But putting that aside, following that arc itself, which I think I was already kind of stumbling with, we get into the final arc, which I think was a nice build-up to a really cool conclusion. I think if anything the story could give us a climax for this one core, I think that was the best option. It gave us pretty much everything that we were looking for. One huge encounter, and also how an assassin would look at solving that situation. But again, at the same time, it introduces plot holes as well, because this entire show, we've never really done anything with a certain character, Dia. Dia was this daughter of a count, that at some point, the story just wants us to know that they're a thing. Like, at the moment that they introduce this idea that Lu wants to marry this girl, I'm confused. I'm like, wait, so is this just a ploy? Is he just using her? I couldn't grasp how they established he actually likes this girl, or if he's just using her. It never made it clear. It just automatically assumes that we know that Lu loves Dia. And again, that's where I feel like either they skip something in the adaptation, or possibly it's just a big plot hole for us to just have to figure out that, is he using her or does he actually love her? Okay, it seems like he actually loves her. I don't know. It never really establishes it. But like I said, it was a solid ending. I really did enjoy how they concluded things, despite the fact that they do have like this moment at the very end where it kind of just hints at what's to come. It's your usual standard source material fare where it just kind of goes, okay, check out the source material now. It really does feel like the show concluded in a way that welcomes a second season. I almost was really expecting them to say, see you, this will continue, see you next summer or something like that. But it never really did. So as it stands now, I don't feel like this is as bad as a source material bait as you'll typically get from a series. I didn't feel like I was clamoring for the next chapter. I think my more desire for a sequel for the series is more kind of centered around, like I mentioned earlier, with that middle arc, that concept of developing this idea of this harem that's surrounding him, that he's not reciprocating, and the possibility of this writer not doing it in a way that's tropey, but rather establishing a future arc. This idea of, as what Maha in the series mentions, this girl named Tart, the first one that he brings in, obviously loves him, and he doesn't reciprocate it. And she mentions this idea of a bottling up, that Tart has this emotion inside of her that she's not getting reciprocated, and that eventually it's going to explode. And like I said, is that whole establishment of that love and that harem element going to be something that will explode later and turn into something really interesting? I don't know. And we might never know unless we get a sequel. Because honestly, this is a series that if we never got a sequel, I'd never touch the light novel. It's not as engaging. It was early on. The series was very engaging early on. I think if we had that same flavor as the earlier segment of this show throughout the entire series, that sense of the demon in shining armor, the sense of this wise man that's really taking on this role as an assassin, a wise person reborn in another world, the gray areas that he kind of lives in, the hypocrisy of how he treats his subordinates, that he's basically the person that he hated so much in his previous life. If it kept those kind of elements, I would probably be more interested in checking out the source material. But as it stands now, how much it stumbles in the later part, I would probably just wait for a sequel season. If that sequel season really does start to play off those elements that I'm playing off in my head, I would definitely be interested to see where it goes from here. But either way, this is definitely an interesting and different take on the isekai genre. It's definitely doing something completely different, and I definitely appreciate it for that. I just think it's whenever it does fall into the typical isekai tropes, it falls apart because it's not your typical isekai. And I don't know why they would want to play into those elements the way they did. But it's still solid. In the end, it's still a solid watch. If you're into isekais, definitely check out this series. It has a phenomenal opening, by the way. But I definitely did enjoy it, and I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you did, leave a like down below, comment, let me know what you thought of the series if you're going to check it out. Subscribe if you haven't already, share this video if you can, support us on Patreon, I'll throw a tips link in the description below. Definitely appreciate everybody that does, and y'all take care.